Let's start with something people rarely admit out loud. Sometimes cutting people off feels peaceful, not dramatic, not impulsive, peaceful. You look at your phone, you see a name, and instead of anxiety, guilt, or obligation, you feel relief when you don't respond. And that relief is confusing because society tells you we're in a loneliness epidemic. It tells you connection is everything. It tells you isolation is dangerous. But what if you don't feel lonely? What if you feel clearer than ever? That's where the psychology becomes interesting. Most people who cut others off were not always distant. In fact, they were often the opposite. They were the reliable one, the emotionally available one, the one who listened at midnight, the one who absorbed tension in the room before anyone else noticed it. They didn't start by withdrawing. They started by overgiving. Over time, something subtle happens in the nervous system. When a person repeatedly gives more emotional energy than they receive, the brain registers imbalance. And imbalance, especially repeated imbalance, triggers protection. This isn't bitterness, it's regulation. According to polyvagal theory, the nervous system shifts states depending on perceived safety. When connection feels overwhelming or draining, the system can move from social engagement into withdrawal mode, not because you hate people, but because your body has learned the closeness equals depletion. For many, this pattern started early. Maybe you grew up managing other people's emotions. Maybe you learned to read moods quickly. Maybe you became useful before you were allowed to be vulnerable. Psychologist Murray Bowen described something called emotional cutoff. It happens when closeness becomes associated with unpredictability or emotional cost. Instead of negotiating safety within relationships, the person creates safety through distance. And distance works at first. You stop explaining yourself. You stop overextending. You stop tolerating small patterns that used to build resentment. And suddenly, life gets quieter. The important question is this: are you building boundaries or walls? Boundaries are selective. They require awareness. You know who drains you and who respects you. You choose carefully. Walls are global. They block everyone equally. They are built from fear, not discernment. Many people who cut everyone off are not impulsive. They are observant. They notice patterns quickly. The friend who only reaches out when they need something. The family member whose affection is conditional. The partner who disappears emotionally when things get serious. Research shows that individuals who experienced early emotional stress often develop heightened activity in brain regions responsible for threat detection. In simple terms, your brain became very good at reading people. You're not paranoid. You're processing social data efficiently. But high sensitivity without boundaries leads to exhaustion. So instead of adjusting relationships gradually, some people choose the cleanest solution: exit. The relief you feel after cutting someone off is real. It is your nervous system stabilizing. But relief is not the same as healing. There is a second phase people don't talk about. After the quiet settles, something else appears: identity. When you remove everyone, you also remove mirrors. No one reflects who you are back to you. No one challenges you. No one surprises you. That silence can feel calm, but it can also feel empty. Humans develop their sense of self in relationship. Total isolation may protect energy, but it does not build emotional strength long term. This is where maturity becomes important. The goal is not to return to overgiving. The goal is not to reopen every door. The goal is discernment, learning to stay without disappearing, learning to say no without vanishing, learning to express limits early instead of leaving late. People who cut everyone off often believe they must show up perfectly or not at all. If they cannot give fully, they would rather withdraw completely. That belief is exhausting. Real connection does not require full capacity at all times. It requires consistency, honesty, and selective vulnerability. If you cut people off and felt peace, that tells you something was misaligned. If you cut people off and feel permanently detached, that tells you something else. There is nothing inherently wrong with protecting your energy. In fact, it often shows growth. But permanent withdrawal is not protection. It is unfinished regulation. The people who learn to move beyond this pattern do something different. They do not disappear anymore. They adjust. They communicate. They test safety gradually instead of assuming it. And they choose carefully. Not many people, just the right ones. If any of this feels familiar, it does not mean you are cold or antisocial. It means you adapted intelligently to situations that required more than they should have. The next step is not becoming more available. It is becoming more selective without becoming absent. That balance is not weakness. It is emotional maturity. This channel focuses on explaining psychological patterns that people often misunderstand about themselves. If understanding your own behavior at this level matters to you, you may want to stay.